Hello, everyone, and welcome to another extremely special episode of Adam's Everything EV. And today, our guest may have the most unique perspective on Fisker of anyone I've ever spoken to. His name is Sean O'Grady of Classic Fisker Atlanta. Sean, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is all mine. I prepared some questions. I know you are in kind of a really difficult position here as far as Fisker, because it's your job to not only sell these cars, but to explain to the customer kind of what they're getting into. So if you're ready, I'm gonna throw some questions at you.
Yeah, fire away, please.
All right, perfect. First, talk to me about your experience in the automotive industry.
I started in the automotive industry in late 2012 after getting out of the military. Went to work here in the Atlanta area for a Dodge dealership that at one point in time had been one of the bigger dealers as far as Vipers go. At the point that I had joined their team, I was able to find a couple really great mentors at the store to really build myself up as a salesperson. Always trying to be a coachable person is a key aspect of personal development. So being able to work alongside and learn from those gentlemen was awesome. And when one of them parted ways with that store, I was able to step in and not only kind of pick up that mantle that he left behind, but also help push that dealership forward back into the, I guess we'll say back into the limelight with Viper Sales. It was a pretty big name within that community from 2013 through 2017 as far as Viper Sales go. And I think what is a really cool translator from my experience then to my experience now, which we'll get into a little later, is that platform, despite being six figures plus, with a high level of exclusivity, also was not without its own issues. It had a pretty big underlying issue in its engine production that led to two pretty significant recalls, R28 and R29, for engine oil consumption and engine oil contamination. And seeing the fixes that Dodge offered at the time, not really actually fixing the problem a couple years later, just making the decision to actually shorten the warranty duration. What we'll talk about today in terms of a small manufacturer, a small OEM, again, like these issues are not exclusive just to them. They're pretty widespread across the board. But being able to also introduce another thing that we'll talk about, which is transparency, understanding that those issues existed, understanding that the best way to address those issues with customers interested in making these really significant purchases was to be transparent with them in advance, let them know what it was that they could expect out of their ownership experience of these vehicles, so that there are no questions in their mind if and when they experience something. I think that that's the only way to operate. Then unfortunately, I think a lot of people that exist on the internet don't necessarily have the same objective outlook as I might or as you might, and so these very negative labels get attached to us, when in reality the end game goal is I want to be as honest as possible with you. I'm holding myself to a level of accountability that others might not, with the goal of maintaining a good rapport and a good relationship with our customers long term, understanding that I could dishonestly sell you a car today, and I'll never get your repeat business. I'll never get your referral business. Or I could be transparent. You still might have an issue in the future, but based on a level of integrity, accountability, and character that exists from the onset of our transaction, moving forward, that might still put you in a position to want to work with me, because you are well aware of what you were facing at the time of purchase. And so I want to just address that. But yeah, I worked in the car industry, like I said, starting at the end of 2012. Built a pretty cool little business within a business. Have some national recognition. I've been featured in DuPont Registry Magazine. I've been featured on some pretty big YouTube channels, VinWiki. I was responsible for the largest group sale and order of Vipers in Chrysler history, which is covered in those publications. Been in a few other magazines, Drag Times a couple of times, and then Business Radio X a few times. I like to consider myself well-versed, but again, like my knowledge base is still down here when it hopefully, at the end of the day will, be somewhere up there. But again, I'm always just trying to build myself up. So worked in the car industry all the way through 2021, left the industry for a little while, started my own business with nothing to do with the industry. And then fast forward to the end of 2023, wound up working for FISKER directly as an OEM. And so we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's actually the next thing I want to ask you. But before that, I just want to say thank you so much for addressing transparency with kind of the importance that it needs to be addressed with. I call it turning the screen around. When you're at the dealership and you see them hacking away at the screen, you don't know what's going on. I feel like when they turn that screen around, they show you, hey, look, man, this is all the inventory I got, or, whatever they're looking up. I feel like that's the approach you're taking with the customer, and I really appreciate that. But let's get right into it. What is your experience with FISKER? Because I know you do have some experience there.
So I was hired into FISKER at the beginning of November of 2023 as a business development manager, which at the time was a very vague description of pretty much all-encompassing sales. I say it's a vague description because it's so vague that like I can't even answer what the general gist of being hired on in that role was. Getting into FISKER, one of the biggest things that I noticed coming out of the automotive industry was coming into that company, there weren't very many people from the automotive industry in a sales role or in a marketing role. The company was very much tech focused. So imagine like being inside Apple and then Apple developing a car and trying to have the salesman that's only ever sold iPads and only ever sold MacBooks and iPhones try to sell that vehicle. The minute you put wheels and tires on something, it becomes a car. And having people with the knowledge base and the experience within the automotive industry be able to step in and lend that knowledge and experience to help further the company or help step that company forward. I think that's massively important, and I think that was one of the key elements that really put FISKER against the power curve was not investing in that earlier on. So got hired on, like I said, beginning of November 2023 as a business development manager, and December, I want to say mid-December, was promoted into the role of regional sales manager over the Southeast. So effectively running the sales team. If you're familiar with FISKER as a brand, if you've spoken with a sales advisor, a vehicle administrator, or supervisors from either of those roles, effectively, I was the gentleman that ran the team responsible for those people. And again, that was over the Southeast. So I worked in that regional sales manager position from, we'll call it mid-December through the very beginning of March. I was actually the very first person laid off by the company following the earnings call where they announced it was either a 10 or 15% layoff pending. I was the very first person laid off the following Monday, so 4 days later. Now, obviously, people are going to listen to this and they're going to say, oh, he was laid off from the company, he's going to have some biases and things like that. I'm going to be very transparent with this again. Like, I do have my biases, but my biases don't exist as though I'm this person that feels burned. So let me just bash the company. Like, that's actually the total opposite. Like, again, the word accountability that I throw out a lot, it exists because it's important in my life. What the intention of these conversations is to hold, that company and these people accountable for their actions at the times that they made them. There are good things and there are bad things, and so it's not just going to be a bash fest. It's going to be just a very honest approach to everything. Again, I'll tell you the positives and I'll tell you the negatives.
It's kind of neat because now you're kind of outside looking in, but they still have to communicate with you. So I'm sure that relationship has, been enlightening for you. And now that you're selling the cars, and that accountability thing, especially, how do you approach a sale? I know you've got these cars on the lot at Classic FISKER. Just kind of walk me through, like, if I'm a customer saying, hey, I'm really interested in this car, what should I know about it? How would you approach that?
So I'll back up and I'll address your comment prior to the question, and then I'll answer your question. So the comment prior to your question about now going to work for a dealership and having this open line of communication with FISKER still after being exited from the company, it's a unique dynamic for sure. the earnings call that took place on that Thursday that I mentioned, where they announced the layoffs, that was actually the first day of the Atlanta Electrified Tour 2024, which was Fisker's East Coast test drive tour that they were putting on. And Classic Fisker of Atlanta, which is owned by the Classic of Atlanta dealer group. They were a previous Fisker dealer back in 2011, 2012 with the Karma, and did really well with that vehicle and that platform. So the owner was, interested just based on that previous relationship in getting re-involved with Fisker with the Ocean platform. And as kind of the stars aligned and we were working towards helping the marketing team while I was still at Fisker put this event together, we said, hey, let's take the location that you currently have it at, knowing that there's a dealer that's interested in coming online, and let's move it to that location where we can better support the customers coming to look at the cars, and we can also positively impact this store. And it was through that 4-day experience, Thursday through Sunday, that I shared with that dealership that really opened the doors for our current relationship. And so when I was exited from the company, we had a conversation, myself and that dealer group, who were keen to bring me on. And it was an interesting conversation about, deciding to put my ego aside, understanding that, I have a family, I have a fiance, I have a 6-month-old son who was born right at the time that I started at Fisker, and providing for them is more important than, my personal, I guess people will call it a vendetta. I won't, but my personal feelings towards Fisker. And so that's, I guess, the serendipitous journey that I went through to end up here. And I think the benefit of it is, I know the benefit of it is that being able to hold that company accountable, not being able to have them, I guess, say something when we know that the reality is different than, what it is that we're being presented. It does allow us to be able to provide our customers with that higher level of transparency, which is what we've been talking about. And so how do we approach the sale of an Ocean? Again, transparency is the word that I'm going to keep going back to. I've made this comment to more customers than I can count. Like, it's my job to not sell you the car. It's my job to give you all the reasons, why we need to look at the vehicle for what it is. And what is it? Well, number one, it actually is quite a good car. I've been driving one since December when I worked at Fisker, and actually choose to drive one now that I'm working at the dealer group. I think it's a great car. I really do. I think a lot of that in part, the design from Henrik Fisker. He's a phenomenal designer, and we can't knock him for that. I think that's a lot of the immediate draw to the vehicle. And the decision that Fisker made to partner with Magna Steyr for production. I mean, it's the same assembly line as the G-Wagon for Mercedes, as the X5 for BMW. And anytime you get around or in that car, you can tell the quality exists. I mean, the doors are nice and heavy. The stamped metal along the trim, with the word power in it, like all that design is really beautiful. The interior of the car, the way that it's trimmed, there's a lot of thought that went into a lot of that design. I've never been an EV fan. Again, with Dodge, I did everything horsepower, V10, supercharged V8s. So coming into the EV space wasn't something that I really cared too much about. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until driving the Ocean that I actually started to like an EV. Now, that doesn't mean that I like all EVs, like I don't. With a passion, EVs could go away tomorrow and I wouldn't care. But I will say that the Fisker Ocean has actually kind of changed my perspective or my perception on EVs. But that being the case, here's the positive with the negative, right? And it's not positive and negative. I think this is something that a lot of people have a hard time with understanding. Imagine a scale. On one side is positive, on one side is negative. And the weights that we use to either tip the balance or balance that scale are made from reality, right? If I put that reality on the positive side, I'm an optimist. If I put it on the negative side, I'm a pessimist. But the reality is we need to look at it objectively, not subjectively. And if I'm putting that reality on one side versus another, there's probably a reason for it. And whether or not you understand that reason or the reason, as intimately as I might, have a conversation with me about it. Don't just label me one way or the other. So while I do like the vehicle, I do believe that the vehicle wholeheartedly is unfortunately being produced through and marketed by a pretty poorly run company. And that's as politically correct as I can say that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's very fair.
So yeah, approaching the sale of these vehicles with our customers, again, we're just very transparent. We do let them know that it's an inherent risk, and we actually explain it exactly as that. It is an inherent risk. Asking me what's going to happen with FISKER is probably the most common question that we get at the store. And that's like asking me to look into a crystal ball. At my time at FISKER, information was very closely guarded. Even at a senior management level, there was a lot of things that we didn't have access to. And we weren't looking for access so that we could, get something on the company. We were looking for access so that we could better do our jobs. And I think that is a detriment that the company has caused itself, is always looking at people from the worst case scenario, worst possible perspective, rather than looking at them as, well, he's trying to be an asset, not a liability. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. So based on that, even at the dealer level, we have very limited information. And so again, asking, hey, what's going to happen with the company? Man, it's a roll of the dice. It's like taking the magic 8 ball when you were a kid, shaking it and asking it the same question. Like I truthfully, I don't have an answer. So the best answer we give customers is, it's like going to Vegas. You can take your money, you can put it on red, or you can put it on black. You can spin the wheel, and whatever way it comes up, it's a 50-50. So it is an inherent risk. And because of that inherent risk, we've actually gone through the process of drawing up a legal contract with our attorney that our customers sign, and that we go through in detail with them. And it explains, like, hey, if the company ceases to exist tomorrow and that warranty goes away, unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do to help you there. On the service side of things, unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do there. It's, you understand the risk, you want to purchase the vehicle, and if you still decide that this is the way that you want to spend your money, hey, I'll be happy to take it. But I want you to understand what you're getting into. And again, it's not that I don't want to sell the vehicle. Obviously, my income is directly based on us selling these cars. But the last thing that I want is for people to have this perception of myself or our team as the stereotypical, shady car salesman, who will say whatever it is that they need to say to get the customer into a purchase and then out the door. And then, when there's a problem, too bad, so sad. Like, no, I want to have a good rapport and a good relationship with our customers. And the only way to do that is through, absolute transparency. Sometimes people might look at that as me being abrasive. It's really not. I'm a very direct person. Unfortunately, I don't really know any other way to be. And so while I try to be as polished as possible, sometimes that might impact customers, differently. And I've actually had customers tell me, when I've used that same line with them, being like, I'm actually not here to sell you this car. They're like, I don't appreciate your tactics. It's like, it's not a tactic. This is reality. Let me tell you about it. Let me tell you why I like it. Let me, tell you why you should be cautious. They can deduce what's going on. They can read the news, so they're no stranger to it. There's a reason the cars are being discounted, almost 50% at this point. If the company was doing, phenomenally well, number one, the amount of inventory that currently exists wouldn't, and number two, the prices that they're being discounted to also wouldn't exist. So I hope that answers your question.
It's absolutely thorough and full and really fresh answer as far as that goes. I had a dealership experience recently. Subscribe to the channel if you want to find out about all that. But I had a dealership experience recently, and there were definitely parts of it that were good, and there were definitely things that, had I known more information, everything would have gone smoother for everybody. But like you said, you are selling the cars, and Classic Fisker currently has chosen not to do service. Can we talk about service a little bit, and maybe why you went into that decision, and just what your take on it is?
Of course. I think this is another one of those big questions that we get asked on a repeated basis. And it's not a decision that we made lightly. It's definitely something that we spent a decent amount of time going back and forth on. So our overall answer is very calculated. Number one, again, like looking at the news, it's pretty easy to see that production has stopped for, we'll say, the indefinite future. And I believe that led to a layoff of, I think, around 500 employees at Magna Steyr. That being the case, the things that we need done when we service vehicles. Parts break, parts fail. So we need to be able to replace those parts. Well, if the company producing the car isn't producing the car anymore, they're laying off the staffing that they had in order to produce the parts in order to produce the car. What's the surplus of parts looking like that we're going to be able to pull from in order to actually service the vehicles, in order to work on the vehicles? Like that's a big concern. It's a big question mark. And what that leads to is an unknown. How long is it going to take for us to work on the car? What's the customer's expectation while we have the vehicle? Is it inoperable? Do they expect us to provide them a loaner car? Okay, well that's startup cost out of our pockets because we only have a finite amount of loaner cars available throughout our other brands that we sell at our dealer group here in Atlanta. We're already staffed up and tooled up to work on some of these other brands. So it would require us hiring more people as far as technicians, which would also require us expanding to a bigger facility to better support service. So there's a pretty significant investment from a dealer standpoint in order to support servicing a new brand within the brands that we currently sell. And I think that initial investment is something that a lot of people don't consider. Our dealer group would be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars at the least to stand up the facility, stand up the tooling, stand up the staffing, invest in the loaner cars. It has nothing to do with receiving the training from the FISKER technicians who, we've been offered that training. There's only so much you can do with a fast tool as far as like clearing codes and just doing very basic things. And so when we look at service as a whole, I think that's definitely, one of the bigger things to consider is it's an unknown on the parts. It's an unknown on a lot of the costs. It's an unknown on the time frames. And a lot of that is never looked at by the customer to the manufacturer. It's always very much looked at from the customer to the dealer providing the service. Like how often do you we'll just arbitrarily say like, hey, you've got a Ford F-150 and it breaks down. That's not a knock to Ford. It's generics. You take it to the Ford dealership and hey, it's going to take me this long to even get your car in to look at it based on how inundated we are with, service right now. And then, okay, when it finally gets looked at based on that list of customers ahead of you, now it's going to take us this long to get parts. And then if there's a delay in parts from the supply chain, okay, that's not something that the dealer has control over. And while we might be phenomenal communicators with our customers, it still puts us way behind the power curve. But the customer doesn't see it as like, oh, it's the dealership is my advocate and they're trying to do what they can to help me. It's always like, man, that dealership, they've had my car for months and I'm so mad about it. And at the end of the situation, like while it might be a positive outcome for the customer, they're less likely to come back and use us again for service. They're less likely to come back and use us again for sales. If anything, it could have a negative impact on the reviews online. And these are all, again, they're very calculated reasons. Like they're things that are outside of our control. And for those reasons, right now, we're not interested in pursuing service. And that's not to say that things might not change in the future. It goes back to being a lot more of a risk than it does a reward. And so for those reasons, and a few others, like that's the reason that we've decided not to pursue service at this time.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that. And you nailed the word that I was going to say to you, and you already said it to me, and that's impact. If you zoom out, Classic is not just FISKER. There's a whole lot of brands. It could be a ripple effect that could negatively affect the reputation of all the brands that Classic's involved with, and especially your reputation as well. So I really appreciate you providing a thorough explanation. I know people are really struggling as far as FISKER owners to find out what's next, how's the service, because we're kind of in a transition period with the dealership model changing and all that. So thanks so much for all the clarification. We're short on time. Just really quickly, you only sell the Extreme and then the price changes, because I definitely want people who are interested in the Ocean to know about that.
Yeah, we actually worked with FISKER a couple weeks ago. Received a phone call asking, hey, listen, like we initially put out this discounted pricing model at the beginning of April. We got through April and saw kind of a plateau or a wall in regards to sales. It seems like we picked up everybody that we could possibly pick up. And it wasn't just us, it was the other dealers that stood up during that time, and then FISKER resuming direct to consumer sales. So they, called, we had a conversation about, hey, let's remove this $2,438 fee. From the customer's perspective, is perceived as a hidden fee or a hidden cost. And as a customer, I wouldn't like that. So let's remove that and let's go to a set pricing model. Let's go to something like 37,499 on extremes, and a little less on ultras, 34,9, whatever the case. And funny enough, 2 weeks later, that's the exact pricing model they rolled out. So that's pretty cool. And I think if anything, what that shows is it actually shows a lot of synergy between the OEM and the dealer partners, and the fact that they're interested enough in our feedback to lead on us and then take that feedback and apply it in a way that positively impacts customers. That being the case, when we break down the price difference, if we look at the base price of an extreme at $52,999 and we compare that to the base price of an ultra, and we compare that to the base price of an extreme at $61,499, it's $8,500 different in standard equipment, right? That's not talking about your paint, your wheels, your interior, and your accessories. So when we discount those prices down, or Fisker discounts those prices down, now you're looking at a flat price of $37,499 on extremes and $34,999 on ultras. That's a $2,500 difference, and it's a $2,500 difference to lose $8,500 in value as far as standard equipment. From the value per dollar standpoint, it doesn't make sense to buy an ultra because you're losing out on a good bit, which is the reason that we've decided to only inventory extremes. Now, if you want to buy an ultra and you call us, as long as we can get our hands on one, which we can, we'll bring it into the inventory, but it's not something that's going to be found sitting on our lot. And simply that's to the customer's benefit.
I really appreciate that approach, because obviously a lot of the original features that the car was being sold on are only on the extreme. So really good decision. And, thanks for working with Fisker to get that result. Finally, because you're here and you've given me your time, and I'm sure owners are really going to appreciate this, we have about 10 minutes left on this interview. What would you like to share with the Fisker community? Anything you'd like to say to them as an owner, as a potential owner, someone who's shopping around? What feedback do you have? What would you like to share, and what information do you think is the most important?
I think I'll reiterate something I said early on. I do believe that it is a good car. It's not without quirks. It's not without little bugs and hiccups and issues, key fobs and things like that. And for all of the early adopters that exist on the internet that are really heavily swayed to one side of the aisle or the other, I would just remind everybody that if you're either looking at the car or you own the car and you want to get involved in these, discussions about the car and things like that, understand that you're buying a vehicle from a startup, and you're buying a vehicle from a startup that hasn't even been available on the market for a year, and you're expecting perfection. And the closest that you will ever get to perfection on a vehicle when you're purchasing it is usually the year right before the model year changeover. And that's probably the year that you don't want to buy it, because you don't want to miss out on what's coming next. And so everything within the automotive industry has always been and will always be evolution. And that's what pushes these things forward. But looking at the product itself and saying like, hey, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I wish this worked better. Like, okay, it's a automotive manufacturer that's based around a lot of software and a lot of technology. And those things, if the company stays in business, will be addressed and updated and upgraded in the future. And so again, like you're getting into a car now, it's not going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you as the consumer should understand that and accept that and be okay with that. And if you're not, then it's not the car for you. And you can go look at a more finished product like a Tesla that's been out for, over a decade. The car is not for everybody. So, that's definitely one of those things that I'd like to reiterate and add more clarity on. And that's exactly what that is. Beyond that, the other thing would be, I understand that a lot of people, on social media, on the internet, on forums, they want to champion the brand because they want to see it succeed. Awesome. No one really wants to see it fail. As much as I was personally impacted and burned by the company, if they can get out of their own way and bring in better leadership that they actually listen to, then it would be great to see the brand stay. because unfortunately it can't continue to operate in the way that it's currently operating. And that's directly attributed to ownership and management. But for everybody that wants to see the brand stay around, that has money invested in it, like, no, I'm not here to see the brand burned to the ground. Obviously, I'll repeat what I said earlier. My income is tied to our ability to sell these cars. We just want customers to approach the purchase of the car from a realistic standpoint. If the brand doesn't exist tomorrow, don't expect to get warranty, don't expect to get service, don't expect to get parts, don't expect to get support. But if it does, awesome. Like, we're here for that. And at that point, we'll reevaluate things like looking at service and providing it. But again, everything that we're doing comes from the realm of reality. And I think a lot of people have a disconnect that we've seen. And I know that, your channel specifically, I follow you and I see so many people on one side of the aisle or the other. And there's really no one that walks the line in the middle. It's like you're either positive towards it, you're negative towards it, or you're nothing at all. And it's like, I want to be the guy that's right in the middle of the aisle. Yes, I'll tell you all the great stuff that actually is truthful and exists, but I'm also going to tell you all the negative stuff that's truthful and exists. And again, we just call that reality. That unfortunately your personal perception towards things doesn't change what that reality looks like today. So yeah, I mean, beyond that, I think it's a good car. I just think it's produced through a poorly managed company. And again, that's not fixable thing. That's just going to require those people at the top to take their ego out of it and let someone with the experience and the knowledge base and the passion come in and actually get you going in a good trajectory. And that's exactly what I had to do when, I was exited from the company and came to, this dealer group and was offered this position. Hey, you're probably not going to be here forever working under this brand, but, talking to myself, hey man, put your ego aside, help the dealership based on the knowledge and experience that you have, which is what you're hoping FISKER will do for itself. Don't be a hypocrite. And do what you need to do for your family. And we'll see what happens. Only time will tell. I think people just need to be a little bit more objective in their approach. And I mean, we're here to help customers at the end of the day.
Well, honestly, if you have a question about FISKER and you'd like to know what it's like to work on the inside and what it's like to sell the vehicle, this is the guy. You're a true gentleman and a scholar from the automotive industry. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to speak with you. Sean O'Grady from Classic FISKER. All your links will be in the description below. If you want to buy one of these cars and you want somebody who has an expert opinion and will provide you with all information and can answer your questions from many perspectives, Sean's the guy to see. Sean, thanks again so much for this.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too. Have a great day.
Hey, smash the like button.
Thank you.